Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching our in-depth extended ag forecast video brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. To begin with, I want to take you to one of my favorite websites. It's NOAA, and what it has here is the National Temperature and Precipitation Rank Maps. It's got quite a history of this, and there's a few drop-down menus you can use to pick the years you want to show. But the time period I'm going to look at here is June 2021, and what you see here is that on the national average temperature rank, it is now the warmest June that we have on record. Again, these records go back about 127 years. As you slide down, they start to break things up into regions, which is what you see next here for both temperatures, min-max, and also precipitation. But let's get down to the statewide numbers right down here. So if we look at average temperature ranks, let's blow this up a little bit. We can see many of the states in the West, from California to Arizona, clear to Idaho, having their warmest Junes on record, surrounded by several states here in the Pacific Northwest having their second warmest. That extended across the northern tier of the U.S. and into the Northeast as well. On the precipitation side of things, let's take a look here. This shows us that South Dakota had its driest June on record, and some of the surrounding states here very dry as well, including Idaho and Montana. Where will be wet? In the south, in parts of the southeast, tucking here over toward the Carolinas, and also kind of on a line from the Red River Valley at the south straight through to Michigan. Parts of lower Michigan here extremely wet throughout the month of June. So what we're doing here is we're just trying to provide some guidance and some background to understand where we are as we progress through this month of July. So the June ranks just came out. From there, I'm going to show you what we've seen over the last 30 days in terms of temperatures. So this graphic looks at the time period of June 13th through July the 11th, and we're looking at temperature ranks by climate district. So during that 30-day time period, I'm sure your eyes drawn to what you see over the west there. Many of the climate reporting districts showing a hottest such time period on record. We got 129 years worth of weather data in this. So the big questions I have is what, if anything, is going to allow this pattern to progress or change? And is there anything we should be on the lookout for as we move forward? But before I do that, I would like to show you what happened here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm going to take you back to June 17th. This is a satellite image here. In fact, let's put some place labels on this so we can see a little bit better. There we go. I want to focus in on Mount Rainier, but I want you to see the Northern Cascades and also the Olympic Mountains here. And what you're looking at is snow cover. So if we take those place labels off, now you can see how much snow is there. What I'm going to do next is I want to show you how things have changed because of all that heat up until just yesterday. So this was June 17th, and this was yesterday. And what you can see is substantial reduction in snow, especially over Mount Rainier. Just take a look at this. Look at all the snow we had here, and now we're looking at that. So that's one of the just important effects that we've had from the extreme heat that's been in the Pacific Northwest. Take a look at soil moisture. This is a map I continue to update you on. This is the top 40 centimeters or 16 inches. And as you look at this, these values, high values here, where it's been very wet, come into the high plains, get through this section of the Corn Belt, into the Northeast where we're even adding more rainfall in today. And you get south of that line, it's been very wet. The Red River Valley of the North into Minnesota. Look at this section of Iowa getting into southern Wisconsin, and then pockets in the Dakotas and back into Nebraska, very dry. Now, by far the driest has been in parts of Montana, Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. For example, the Willamette Valley and parts here of the Columbia Basin showing up with near record dryness during this time period. Well, over the last week, this is what we've had in terms of precipitation. Now remember, this map is just valid through midnight on the day on Monday. We can see a few things. There was that cutoff low over Texas, and as it slowly moved on, brought a ton of coastal rain in through here. Some locations picking up 6 to 12 inches of rainfall. This, of course, was the path of Tropical Storm Elsa, which dumped a lot of rain in parts of New York and the surrounding areas here. Let's just kind of circle this whole region here, seeing exceptionally heavy rainfall. And then you can kind of follow a corridor right in through here that was quite wet as well, and pockets down here in the Tennessee Valley that saw some storms, and then right along the Gulf Coast. Now we're pointing out these wet regions so that you can then take them away and see the very dry areas. I'm talking about this part of Iowa, getting into this section of Wisconsin, right in through here in Minnesota. Look at the Red River Valley of the North. And even though rainfall did return to South Dakota, this was not the kind of corrective rains to buy a lot of time for the crop there. So we need a lot more. There were streaky storms coming through parts of Montana, and we're going to watch this corridor right through here over the next 48 hours for more storms, some of which could be severe. So we'll get that set up for you here in just a few seconds. But I thought we'd take a good look here at this last 7 days of total precip. Now, speaking of Tropical Storm Elsa, I want to just show you some broader things that are happening in the tropics that are going to offer some guidance in the long-term forecast. The Indian monsoon is advancing to the north, and that's what it does throughout the month of July. And therefore, much of our upper level flow, let's maybe rephrase that, much of the upward and downward motion, the net motion in the atmosphere, is going to lead to a lot of rising motion over here in this part of the world. So between India, the Philippines, Indonesia, and parts of Australia. And then a lot of sinking motion here. So this is just a very broad circulation. It is related to the MJO, of course. And what I want to point out is if we do have a lot of upper level subsidence, that convectively suppresses this particular region. And therefore, it appears that in the coming days, possibly 10 plus days or so, we're not expecting a lot of tropical activity. You see, the MJO is hanging out over here. It's in the Indian Ocean. It's curling into null space throughout the end of July. And null space, again, is this circle. I bring that up because if the MJO was way out here at high amplitude on this graphic, we could use it as a much stronger predictor. But I see it hanging out in here a lot, and it's staying near where the Indian monsoon is really dominating the flow in the tropics. So the net effect of that is over the next 5 days, we're not watching anything here from the National Hurricane Center according to their 2 p.m. update. And if we just think about this statistically, when we look at the number of hurricanes and tropical cyclones we've observed, it's actually quite typical that there's a bit of a dip right here in July before we really ramp up in August to reach that September 10th peak in tropical cyclone activity. And then as you can see, it comes back down after that. So we're right into this little lull. What I would recommend is in the tropics, we need to watch it very carefully at the end of the month and getting into the month of August, as we start to see things shift around. Now, since we're talking about the broader pattern, I want to also like to discuss this. It's the vertical and zonal integral of total atmospheric angular momentum. It's kind of a mouthful, but what we're talking about here is the net flow from the west to the east in the whole of the atmosphere. And what we saw beginning in June was a decrease in this value. And what happens typically is as the value decreases, the atmosphere tends to have more of a tendency to become blocked up, more north-south in its flow. Now, it's tried to recover here at the beginning of July, but we're still well below average. And what I'm going to be watching for the North American forecast is this area and through here. All right. Now, that's between 30 degrees north and 60 degrees north, where both the subtropical and the polar jet stream live. Now, they're generally weak in summer anyway, but we would want to be seeing higher values if we're going to break out of this pattern and get more active weather systems coming through. That's the main kind of gist of what I'm telling you here. So I'm not surprised then to see that one of our big indices called the East Pacific Oscillation, I'll explain it in a moment, is positive in the near term through the 15th, and then after this weekend stays negative for a while. Now, what does that mean? Because if we carry a negative EPO all the way into the 4th week of this month, we need to understand what that means. It's all about the jet stream position just in the Gulf of Alaska to the Pacific Northwest. And that tends to be the setup for the flow of the jet stream across the rest of North America. So the result of that analysis is boiled down into this map. Now, when we have these positive values of the EPO, we tend to be very warm in the Pacific Northwest and across the whole of the West. And there tends to be a correlation with cooler weather in the plains heading into the Midwest. All right. Now, if our EPO is forecast to go negative, which you see it is here, again, this is just relaying to us what the jet stream is going to be doing, we would expect this pattern to flip. In other words, maybe we could move some of that heat that's been in the Northwest east, maybe from the Four Corners states through Wyoming into Montana and occupy up here north of the 49th into the Canadian Prairie. So that is what I'm getting in terms of a signal in the flow of the atmosphere, given that we've pulled back on some of the tropical signals here in the near term, where they're a bit more static. So let's talk about that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the GFS 12Z ensemble, and we're going to look here at the upper level flow of the atmosphere. Blues are the troughs and the reds are the ridges. As we go through Tuesday into Wednesday, we're going to talk about this little shortwave right here and what it's going to possibly do in the midsection of the country in terms of exciting some severe weather throughout the day on Wednesday. But you'll see that after it passes through, take a look at the flow pattern. Let's just get this out here into the weekend. Sunday. There we go. There's a ridge in place here and a second ridge that's like that. This is that negative EPO that we're talking about. And what this is going to do is take that heat that's been over the Pacific Northwest and displace it to the east. So therefore, Montana, the Western Dakotas, and the Canadian Prairie are going to be seeing some very hot temperatures compared to normal. But the flow is doing that after it, which tells me that the likelihood of parking a frontal boundary somewhere in this area seems to be relatively high as we go into next week. And then as we play through Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, let's just go all the way out to next Saturday, by the way, you do still tend to see that ridge in place here. And it tends to be oriented like this with that EPO signature just off the Pacific Northwest like that. Now, is this a cool down for the Pacific Northwest? It is, but the jet stream has been so far displaced to the north that it's not like we're going to be seeing cooler temperatures overall. It's just going to show us a shift. And that brings me to a bigger picture on what precipitation is going to do. Now I'm going to show you the ECMWF for this. To be honest, both the ECMWF and the GFS have very similar forecasts for the jet stream flow. Now the rain that you see here is coming in the next 48 hours. And we're going to talk about what could be missed in Iowa. Then a lot of what's left is there's a cutoff low over Illinois today that's spinning in this direction. That'll be out. And there'll be a lingering frontal boundary in through here, plus the southwest monsoon, which is really going. And we could get that ring of fire precipitation pattern setting up around the development of the southwestern monsoon. It's wet in the northeast. And we're going to keep an eye on that. We're going to continue to keep the above average precipitation in Texas. But this area here, after the rain that I'm just talking about in the next 48 hours, has a risk of going over hot and dry again. And we need to have a discussion about that. So flow pattern right now. Well, here's that upper level low that's slowly spinning over Illinois. And it's going to be doing this in the near term. The Bermuda high is sitting right on top of Bermuda. And that is going to be a feature that's going to be around for a while. While the flow may look a little stagnant here across the west, let me take you up into the upper levels of the atmosphere. There we go. And what we're going to watch carefully is this right here. That trough is going to run over the top of this ridge, and it's going to come right in through this section of the country. And as it does so, give us our best chance at some severe weather. So our all hazards weather map looks like this right now. There's flood advisories, flood watches out here, and also severe thunderstorm going into the eastern part of Pennsylvania into New York and New Jersey. All of what you see in the west here is primarily red flag warning. It's heat advisory, excessive heat watches, and warnings. Although we do have a couple of places, could get some big storms out here late tonight and this afternoon, I should say, in this part of Washington, locally some heavy rainfall. So since we're talking about severe weather, I want to show you some statistics here. And this graphic along the top here is showing you the count of severe weather reports broken down by wind, hail, and tornadoes. So right now, we've had 6,856 wind reports. What's important to understand is we're below the average for the last 15 years. In fact, it's the third fewest in the last 15 years in terms of severe wind reports. On the hail side of things, we sit as the fewest. See that? I mean, there have been places that got clobbered with hail, but that's the fewest. In tornadoes, it again is the third fewest on record going back 15 years. Okay. Now, thinking about that hail, I did look over the weekend at our maximum estimated hail size graphic. And you can kind of see, I know I got this blown up a little bit. Let's shrink it. There we go. You can see the color coding here lining up with the maximum estimated hail size. And there were a few storms like these in Missouri into western Illinois, or this one right here in Iowa, and streaking across parts of the northern and high plains where we saw some big hail. Now, I was on Twitter earlier today kind of keeping up with some folks, and I did see that coming out of Boone County, just to the west of Ames, right in through here, that particular storm put down, you can see, are some very large hail. We got a report of this from Ryan, put this out on Twitter today, showing some of the damage here in Boone County in Iowa. And I guess that's his 4-year-old son out there asking, look, how do we fix the damaged corn? There was a lot of damage to that corn in that particular area. So it's amazing to think about that, remembering that nationally we are way down, less than half of normal in terms of hail reports at this point. We should be about 3,000. We're sitting somewhere around 2,600. So just something to keep in mind there. Since we're on severe weather, I want to take a look at the latest 3-day update. That's what these 3 maps are here from the National Weather Service. So you can see today it's in the Northeast and in Florida. But then as we get into tomorrow, this is going to be the area we're going to watch second, as the storms come out and possibly move across this area. We're still going to have that severe weather risk over in parts of Pennsylvania. Now let's go back and take a look at what we're going to see in the day on Wednesday, the 14th. So that wave that's emerging here cuts into parts of South Dakota, clipping parts of Nebraska. And what I want to know is how far and how widespread do the storms become as they move into this section of Minnesota, Iowa, and eventually into Wisconsin. Now remember, a great resource to keep up in front of you while you're looking at all of this is one of my favorite sites, blitzertongue.org. So you can use this to monitor lightning in addition to using radar like we always do. But it's interesting to see all the lightning in the southeast today, the lightning around that cutoff load that's coming through parts of Illinois over here in east central Illinois, as you see, and some of the storms right now going into parts of Pennsylvania, coming out of Maryland and heading toward New Jersey. So watch this later on, because as we take a look, let's blow this up. This is the 12Z NAM. We're going to see that through this evening, a lot of scattered storms in the south, the severe storms possible here in the northeast, and wrapping around that cutoff low, we're going to watch for those storms as well. So into the overnight hours, you can see that's what we're expecting, a lot of scattered storms. Now, when we get into the day on Tuesday, storms move through lower Michigan, scattered to the south of it through the lower Mississippi River Valley. But it's these storms right here I'll be watching very carefully. Now, you saw earlier in the video, South Dakota had its driest June on record. And by Tuesday afternoon, we'll get a sense as to how these storms are going to organize. So let's pause this here in the evening. Why these scattered storms in the Four Corners states? The upper level lows moved into Quebec and out of Ontario. And we got scattered storms across the Ohio River Valley and over in parts of the Northeast. So again, we're going to watch these storms to be severe yet again. But keep an eye right here, okay? Because into the overnight hours on Tuesday, we see those storms organizing, possibly producing more broad-scale wet weather, and unfortunately with it some strong straight-line winds and some hail. And as we then go into the morning on Wednesday, now we see where those storms are expected to be from the models. And here from the NAM throughout the day on Wednesday, what will be critical to see is, do we bring these rains far enough to the south at those dry fields and through this area? And how much rain is spread through the dry pockets of parts of Minnesota out of South Dakota? What I've got for you at this point from the high-res NAM is out to about 7 o'clock. So again, storms pop around the ridge in the Four Corners, and we see that system moving here through the upper Midwest. Now, unfortunately, as I look out beyond this, the 12Z model runs, which just came out here a little while ago, and I had a chance to analyze them, are not adding much more rain. I'm going to talk about that, because this is the 12Z forecast from the European. So let's put it together. Upper level low here does this. We see the severe storms in the northeast. This system comes out Tuesday night through Wednesday and skirts into this area and eventually moves on off to the northeast. We'll talk about this lingering frontal boundary here. But do you notice how dry the Canadian prairie is through the upper Midwest, through the Red River Valley of the North? Southwest monsoon starts to kick in, could see ring of fire storms over there in the west. But let's actually break this down and take a look at how this whole pattern sets up. So to do that, let's go to our side-by-side comparison, GFS on the left, European on the right. To be honest, both models have a pretty good handle, I think, on what they're seeing. We've seen through Monday, into Tuesday, and now into Wednesday afternoon and evening. This is where the models begin to separate. The GFS is more generous with the rain farther to the south and east. The European takes it right toward Minneapolis. See that? So this is the same time, 7 p.m. on Wednesday evening Central Time. Now from there, let's go into the day on Thursday and work our way into overnight hours on Thursday, where the front slides through here. See this? And then go from there into Saturday morning. Now at this point, let's look at the European model. They both suggest the same thing, but there'll be a frontal boundary that lingers into this area, fed on Gulf moisture. So you can see the scattered storms here. It's actually in both models that's going to be there. And then that frontal boundary is still lingering in place right in through this region. So this is Friday evening, now getting into Saturday. Now what I want you to watch after Saturday is what develops in the north central plains and upper Midwest. You see in both models, as those fronts linger like this, high pressure begins to try to build into this area. And as the high pressure builds in on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week, you see what I see. The main boundary gets pushed farther to the south. And this area here, stretching back as well, is drier in both models. Now, we put all that together. I'll just show you the 12Z European. I think it's going to be our best representation at this point. There's the cutoff low. See it? Here's the storms coming into the Tennessee Valley out of the southeast. Now watch right here. Here comes the storms through Wednesday, and the European takes the heaviest rain through Minneapolis into northern Wisconsin. After that, the front lingers. Remember us talking about it? Right in through this area and just slowly pushes south. Now, even just looking here at the operational Euro, missed, right? And after this goes through, what's there to replace it after that? Because that high pressure cell moves in. We do get that ring of fire setting up here, but this is the area I'm very concerned about. So when we look at the difference in the models, notice this. European takes the track of the storms through here. Remember, these colors on this map show us where the GFS is wetter. GFS is wetter here, European is wetter there. So that's a major difference across an area that has had major discrepancies in precipitation from the models all season. We're wetter south of this, but that is a critical thing to take in. Now, as I think about all of that, let's now stretch this out again. And just a reminder, we're going to watch by the time we get past this weekend into next week, the ridge expand like this as that EPO signature takes over. What this ends up giving us is a stalled out boundary here with heat coming into this area. So the GFS says, leave the storms here on the stalled out boundary. Drier in this area. Ring of fire storms in this region. The European model, well, we're going to look at this a couple different ways. This first map here takes us all the way out to day 10 from the 12Z run today. And the color coding represents the probability of receiving less than a half inch of rainfall. Less than a half inch. So you see that system right there is the key. North of it, it is showing up drier, as you can see in the map here. Let's flip from there to the probability through the next 10 days of getting an inch of rain or more. And just pause the video and take a close look at this. This is the probability of getting an inch or more in the next 10 days. And if we just look out there exclusively to the day 7 through day 14 time period, that's when the boundary sags south and stalls. That's when we see the best kind of southwest monsoon ring of fire. And that's when this area goes over toward drier. We've now seen it in both models. All right. There's some pretty good agreement out that far. Let's talk temperatures and long range, and I'll wrap it up. Temperatures first. As we just take a look here at the high temperatures over the coming days, we're cooler along the coast in California, but very hot in the interior and hot to the Pacific Northwest. As we let this go from Monday into Tuesday and Wednesday, you're going to notice that the temperature pattern starts to heat up in this area. But we just don't see major anomalies in terms of differences from normal across much of the rest of the country. So this Friday getting into Saturday and Sunday. So now the heat is here under that ridge, downstream near normal to cooler than normal. We've gone back to the 90s in the Central Valley of California, up through the Willamette Valley to see temperatures in the mid-80s is great given the heat they've seen there. That's that shift that we talked about at the very beginning. How long does it last? Well, this is the day 5 through 10 temperature pattern from the 12Z European. You can see the net effect of that ridge spreading. So we see the near normal to cooler than normal pattern here with the stalled out boundary making it wet in this area as you saw into week 2. The heat comes out of the Pacific Northwest and spreads here as that jet stream pattern takes hold, which we kind of explained at the very beginning. If we look longer term, let's talk about what I'm expecting here. First, what time period? July 21st through August 20th. We're looking at the European weeklies. And what we notice here is that there is high pressure in this area. Now, hang on just a second. I may have delayed enough, that we may have the new data in. Perfect, we do. This just came in here while we were recording this. So I'm going to show a 30-day, and let's now go back out to that same time period. Good, very consistent forecast from the European model. The brand new data just showed up here. That's the Bermuda high. We are not slowing down the feeding of the moisture into the Gulf of Mexico. That's been a consistent theme. So let's now see what the new Euro says in terms of precip. Exactly. So you notice that this area being fed on that moisture is going to show up wet. I am still unconvinced as to where the models are placing this westward and northward boundary on precip. I think it is still too far to the north. And therefore, I'm expecting the Red River Valley of the North through the Canadian Prairie to be drier, and even drier pockets in the Central Plains as well. But this is a very robust signal across the mountains to see that ring of fire precipitation pattern set up. And my guess is, let's see this temperature pattern. Yeah, it's just kicking the can down the road, keeping that warmth in the west and in the Pacific Northwest. It's the same pattern we saw at the beginning of my forecast video with the greatest heat farther to the north. That pattern has been on tap now for most of this summer. And it appears that it's going to continue through, well, it could be the third week of August. Now, of course, we'll look for adjustments and shifts in this because we know that getting beyond about 7 to 10 days, the forecast accuracy drops considerably. But that's where we use this ensemble technique to look for those consistencies and to look for the persistence in the pattern. So that's what I've got for you today in our extended briefing. I'll get a short one recorded for you here in a few moments, but I appreciate your attention. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.